Brain is actually one of the hardest things to get anything into.
BBB.
It's got a barrier there called the blood-brain barrier. It refuses to open, and there's a good reason for that, because if it opened all the time, every time we went and consumed water or beer, our brains would be flooded with it. Yeah. So it has to have this barrier, but you can open this barrier intermittently. You can open it with chemicals. There's a chemical called mannitol that does it very well. You have to give a pretty high dose, but it only opens it for a minute or a few seconds.
Everyone, and welcome to a really special episode of Wellness at the Speed of Light. I've been really excited about this particular episode with Dr. Bankole Johnson, who I met a couple months ago in a phone conversation and made the determination within the first about 3 minutes that it's one of the smartest people that I've ever spoken to. He is one of the top really neuroscientists in the world. He holds multiple degrees. We can get into all that. He is an expert in addiction medicine and regenerative medicine. And he is also a mathematics expert. We were talking all kinds of crazy math stuff. We won't bore you with that, today on the show. That's a personal, internal thing. We'll keep away from mathematics and quantum physics for today. But I wanted to welcome Dr. Johnson. Welcome to the program. It really is an honor to have you here today with us in beautiful Los Angeles.
Thank you. It's actually cooler than Miami, so it's amazing to be here.
Isn't it crazy, this weather that we're having? I was not expecting it.
And thank you for the wonderful introduction. I hope I can at least get halfway to reaching that pinnacle you've set for me.
No, you've certainly earned it. I mean, you're the number of publications you're on. There's so many. There's people just have to go. They're just gonna have to look it up. Just trust me, and we'll put all that stuff at the end of the podcast so you can go and research Dr. Johnson and all the amazing things he does. So I want to start with really just basic stuff, because my mission in life is to take really complicated subjects and try to distill them down so that people out here really know what is really possible with the things that we're doing. And right now, there is so much going on, so many changes in medicine that are going to completely revolutionize the way that we approach disease, longevity, and even hitting escape velocity, where we're going to be living to 140 and then 170 and then 270 and on. And I mean, we're talking biblical stuff, right? Like when we used to be 900 years old. I believe, I don't know when that faded, but at some point we stopped living to 900 years old. So let's just start with the basic stuff. I'm gonna and I ask this to a lot of my guests sometimes, in different time periods. Why is there so much confusion right now in what is available for people to really take control of their lives and their health right now? Because I talk to people constantly, and the level of they just have no idea of where to begin, what's possible. I'll let you take it from there.
I think that's an amazing introduction. So I think something really interesting happened in the United States and around the world, and it was called COVID. And what happened with COVID was, before COVID, everybody had the opportunity to say to themselves, well, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm not going to be dead because I caught some viral disease. But then comes along this indiscriminate killer, killing children, killing adults, killing fit people, killing the old, and so no one felt safe. At that point in time, people began to reckon that it was possible to improve their health, and they needed to be not only looking good, but physiologically and biochemically looking good in order to be able to withstand, the ravages of disease. And for me, on a personal level, I lost 13 relatives to COVID. So I felt really vulnerable to this disease. And so that made a big change. Another thing happened, which was a sort of quiet revolution in the United States, all of us who are doctors had been born looking at this pyramid of health, you know, and in fact, it should have been an inverted pyramid because it was totally nonsensical. And a lot of doctors went out and they sold these things to clients and patients, and unfortunately, people got sick. They got fat. We had an obesity crisis, and the problem was it was incorrect. The third aspect that came about was social media. Social media has exploded information about regenerative medicine and health, fitness, exercise, nutrition. The problem is 80 to 90% of it is just plain wrong. So the difficulty now is for an honest practitioner who knows what is possible to be able to discriminate between what is truly fact, what is fiction, and what is possibly, as you've mentioned, science fiction or the quantum leap in order to take us forward. And that, I think, has been one of those three things have been the transition. So we are here now at probably the most exciting period in medicine. Regenerative medicine is extremely exciting. And the reason why was round about when I started in regenerative medicine, all we were doing was helping symptoms. And we were helping symptoms because I was a regular professor in university. I was a professor of 7 specialties. I was a professor of pharmacology, neurology, psychiatry, molecular genetics. And guess what? I was sitting in a citadel or a cathedral of illness. Everybody who came into the hospital were coming into this cathedral of illness. There was no one who was well. And the concept of people becoming well was strange. Our cancer centers grew bigger, our trauma centers grew bigger. And one of the pivotal points for me was that we had gone from the great advances in medicine that occurred at the turn of the last century in this to becoming treaters of symptoms. And if you look at the diagnostic codes of most of medicine, whether you're looking at ICD-9, they became huge. And all of these were just multiple symptoms. And that interaction, that humanistic interaction of a doctor as a healer, in which a patient comes to you and say, "Doctor, what should I do? Could you give me advice? How could I improve my health?" All the doctors that have been trained in the last 30 years, they've lost that. So there are very few healers left, and into that void has stepped all sorts of types of healers. So this is a problem we have in medicine, but it will straighten itself out. I hope it doesn't take another 30 years, but it will straighten itself out.
First of all, I'm going to be using that all the time. The Cathedral of Illness. I mean, that's amazing. I've never heard anybody say that before. That is exactly right. I am beyond frustrated. We spend $4.9 trillion on healthcare. Like when you look at the whole basket of the situation, 90% of it is on sick care. And you're absolutely right. Everything's getting bigger. The ICUs are bigger. The trauma centers are. I mean, trauma's a little different, but all of these wards, they just get bigger and bigger, and our society is getting sicker and sicker. I ask myself, and I actually have posted this on social media, you could go to these medical ICUs and you can hear the doctors talking, and they're my colleagues, right? I don't run an ICU, but it's interesting, and sometimes we'll have patients in the ICU, so we have to go round on them, and I hear them talking, just these brilliant doctors, right? They're talking about, here's the renal function, here's the pulmonary function, here we're going to titrate, right, the breathing tube, we're going to do all this stuff, respiratory therapy is going to come in, you come around rounds, there's 9 interns behind them, everyone's taking notes. That's fantastic. It's amazing that we can save these people's lives. I think it's amazing. We could keep people alive for a long time that otherwise would have died in any other time in history. There's no chance, right? However, no one's asking this question. Why is this person here in the medical? I don't mean the trauma ICU where you get hit by a car. We know why they're there. But how did that happen? Why do they have multi-organ failure? Why did they get this thing? Why did their autoimmune disease get so out of control? They're now intubated and sedated and on death's doorstep, et cetera, right? And so I think that you're absolutely right. I think in the last 30 years, we've stopped asking the questions. And I think that, and you tell me this, because you run an amazing, private practice right down, in Florida. So when somebody comes in, if they come and see you and the question is, Doc, I just don't feel well, the difference between what you're going to offer them and what they're going to get in the traditional primary care office, people have can you talk about how it's so different? They don't even, I feel like we've gotten so far down the road, I feel like in traditional medicine right now, they don't even have an answer to I don't feel good. They won't even answer you. Or they'll just give you some random script. They'll say, "Hey, take Neurontin." Neurontin. What does that have to do with I don't feel good? I don't even know what the connection is. But just elaborate on that, because I liked where we're going. We'll get into regenerative medicine in a little bit.
So I'll give you another acronym. A lot of patients who come to see me, and we run, I believe, a stellar practice. We only have a maximum of 8 people a day. And that means that I'm available if I need to spend an hour or 2 or 3 hours with a client. That's what I spend. There is no clock. Most of the patients who come to me suffer from something called doctoritis. Now, this is another syndrome.
I know that disease.
And they've come with a list of symptoms and a list of medicines, and not one person has tried to understand the whole person. The second thing is most physicians are so busy in the clinical practice, they don't ask the simple question, who is the patient? Now, obviously, the person who seems to have come through the door could be the patient, but that might not be the true patient. The true patient could be mom who is struggling to bring the autistic child to see me, but it's mom who is really depressed and in need of the treatment.
Yes.
And all the focus, because mom comes to talking about the kid. So a lot of doctors, unfortunately, nowadays do not take a holistic view to, as you've said, ask the question, who is the patient? Why are they here? What are they trying to get out of this practice of medicine? What for them looks like success? Now, to the doctor, the absence of symptoms looks like success, but that might not be the success that the client needs. So let me give you an example. We have a patient recently who came to see me with Parkinson's disease, and we'll talk about the regenerative medicine process. And we did all the usual things. We used rating scales, standardized rating scales, but that was not important to the patient. Do you know what was important to the patient? That he could use a key card and enter his hotel room without falling down, being able to sit on the bed and talk to his wife, to being able to recognize members of his family, to be able to walk unaided to the buffet, to be able to choose his own food. None of that is on a rating scale, okay? So if all we were doing was simply measuring things on rating scales, we would have failed him. And he had a superb outcome, and I'm going to be seeing him again in a few weeks in London. But what really strikes me was when he was leaving, I got a chance to meet his daughter. And this is a long line of genetic problems. And then I got to meet the son. And then I got to meet the whole family. And guess what now? I not have one person I'm looking after. I have an entire family because they do have some kind of genetic carrier. So asking yourself who is the real patient is fundamentally important, and this is never asked, whether it's in any field of medicine, whether it's regenerative medicine or addiction medicine. Addiction medicine is particularly a problem of who is the client, who is the patient. I participated in a program with the governor of Maryland. We drove around Maryland with, it's sort of interesting for a while. There were all these sirens and, wherever he went, and it was sort of a lot of razzmatazz, and everybody will gather, and he made all these big speeches. And at that point in time, I found it fascinating because nobody ever sort of stopped the car for me and all of this type of thing. But what was important was, for the first time in my life, I was able to find a family that there was a 7-year-old addict, a 7-year-old. There is no textbook telling you how to treat a 7-year-old addict. Now, the father was also an addict. The grandfather was an addict. The mother was an addict. So now this becomes a community problem, because how do you treat this person? And this boy had an opiate addiction. Are we going to give the whole family methadone? Are we going to bring all of them into a clinic?
Yeah.
So the point here is that if I hadn't gone to their home, I would not have known that dad was an addict. I would have only seen the 7-year-old. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have known mom was an addict. I wouldn't have known that the whole family was this addictive family. So one of the other pieces of medicine that I think we've all forgotten is what was known as true family medicine. Now, family practitioners do something very different from here. I'll give you one more example. I was privileged to travel to Southern Africa, after apartheid, and Al Gore brought, and President Clinton brought everybody for experts to come and help these individuals in the Transkei. And it was interesting because I did want to meet Nelson Mandela. I was sort of excited and all of that to go.
It's amazing.
But we ended up in a car. I remember coming down from my hotel room and entering a car. And next to me was the Surgeon General of the United States. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is another big shot. I have to be careful. The first question he asked me, obviously, was, Professor Johnson, have you ever been arrested? I said, arrested? Why would I be arrested? I said, I haven't done anything. So I've been arrested many times during the civil rights movement. It's my badge of honor. I said, I didn't know you could get a government job with this record. I said, yes. And so we then went out to Transkei. And what struck me was truly interesting. When you drove into this village, there were no men, because the men had all been moved away because of the apartheid, but the children looked funny. Let's just call it funny. And that puzzled me, and I thought about this for a long while. Why do all the children in this village seem to look alike? I haven't been to Southern Africa before. Well, guess what? When I got to the bottom of it, a good proportion of them had something called fetal alcohol syndrome.
Yes.
And guess what? When you have children in the United States with fetal alcohol syndrome, you think, well, mom was drinking, and then mom gave birth to this child, but father was also drinking. Here was the kicker here. The kicker was the women were making and fermenting alcohol for the husbands who really never truly came. And by tasting the alcohol, they became the alcohol addicts, and their children developed fetal alcohol syndrome. And we ended up setting up one of the largest projects on fetal alcohol syndrome between the United States and Southern Africa. And it's one of those things that come to us as doctors, where one of the most powerful things we have as doctors is the power of observation.
Yes.
And had that observation escaped me, well, all I'd have gone home thinking is, well, it was just a little curious artifact. But then you apply to your curiosity and to your observation your medical knowledge and your medical understanding, and then you're able to help them. Now, there was a funny anecdote to this, which I'll just finish off on, because, I got a report. I got back home, and I got a report back, and I was asked, what can we do for these people? Should we send them computers? Could we send them more information? Could we send them treatments? And I thought about this, and I said, we can't send them anything. There's nothing to send them. They are better organized than us. They don't have computers, but they have a note of everybody there. They know everyone. The women ran group sessions. They ran programs for women in which they taught the other women a trade to be able to sell things so that they didn't have to rely on their men. This was true community medicine working. And I said, if you really want to train US doctors, you should send them here. We shouldn't be telling them what to do because we're going to damage their health system. And it was really funny. For the first few weeks, I said, oh, Professor, you would say something like that. And I said, but think about it. They have developed a style of medicine that we have lost that tradition for in the United States. And that tradition is what needs to come back. And the real doctor healer, we have lost those people. I don't know why. I know, Doc, that you're a healer from our phone calls, because when you called me, you've talked about helping people and you talk about the family. You're a very unique physician. Most physicians don't talk with me that way. They spend a lot of time telling me what the symptoms are. And I tell them that I'm not an AI machine, so I can tell you. And then I ask them what the patient is like and how they feel. And that seems to throw them. And they said, well, Professor, why are you asking these questions? Can't you ask me something more complicated? I said, well, that is the question. And so...
Well, that's the mystery. That's why we do what we do, right? I don't know exactly why you went into it, but for me, it was because I love solving puzzles, I love people, and so combining those two things, it's the ultimate mystery. How do you heal people and make them better? And until I remove myself a little bit, and I'm still a practicing spine surgeon, I still do all that, but that's a little bit different, right? Somebody has a structural problem, if it's severe, we take care of it with surgery, but most people can be taken care of with regen medicine and other things. But it wasn't until I went on the integrative health side that I sat there for an hour and a half, 2 hours with patients that I could really do what I love doing, knowing that person. And when you know them, man, you can just heal them by talking to them. Right, that's part of the healing journey, but then you can get the clues. And I love what you said about in the village when you see that, because we get that same thing and I feel like we do it. Like, for example, when I see patients, if we're rounding, you can just kind of look at somebody and say, that's a patient that's at risk. I don't need to see, I don't need to look up and see what their heart rate is or their blood pressure. I'm like, this patient's deteriorating. This patient's going to be in the ICU in 2 hours because they don't look well, right? You know that. Why? Because of tens of thousands of experiences. It's there, right? Because how many children have you looked at before that? Thousands. So you saw them and said, something is different. I don't know what's going on. And I do that too. Like, you just get that feeling. And we've gone away from our own feelings. That's what you mentioned. AI. I love AI. I think AI is going to completely revolutionize medicine. But AI doesn't have the soul. It doesn't feel like right now if AI is listening, which it is, right? If it's listening to us right now, it doesn't feel you. It's taking an input and trying to come up with a solution. But I can feel your energy. I can feel your spirit. And this is what we do with your patients. And this is what you do. Which is why you're such a sought after doctor for healing, and we are absolutely missing this, right? In our clinic, I'm sure that this is the first thing they tell you, right? The first 10 to 15 minutes is spent with them being so upset about the way they've been blown off, talked to, no one listens to them, no one can figure it out, and it's really frustrating. So. Listen, incredible story. I wish we had hours to go into these things. We gotta just talk about your South Africa experience for hours. That's fascinating. Make sure you take me next time you go down there on a trip. I'm all in. We could do a podcast from South Africa. That would be fun. We'll bring the Surgeon General in as well. Let's talk about regenerative medicine. Okay. Regenerative medicine is right. Our species, the way we look now, right. We have an audience here, so like the way we all look, maybe about 300,000 years or so. This version, right, of humanity, something like that, and we're here because our bodies have this ability to regenerate itself under the right conditions, right? We've lived next to volcanoes, toxins, poisons. I mean, we've lived in poison jungles. We've been attacked by things. Yes. We've eaten all kinds of things we're not supposed to eat, and here we are as a species. And so, right now, the way medicine is, it's all about we go in and fix a molecule. Oh, this molecule, I'll give you that one. right? SSRIs, we're going to block, serotonin reuptake, right? That it's very specific. Or we're gonna actually fix. You have a knee problem, let's just cut it out, and we're going to put in a big chunk of metal. Okay. And by the way, people that have knee replacement, they do pretty well, but we can heal ourselves if we are put into the right condition. This is what you spend your life doing right now, right? Putting the human body in a condition where it can repair itself by giving it whatever tools it has and putting it in that right place. So give me, for people that are watching, because some people, you say regenerative medicine, they just like stem cell. Okay, what is that? And they're like, I don't know. They have no idea what so just give me a simple version. What is regenerative medicine? What is kind of the goal of it? And then we can talk about the difference between kind of what stem cells are, and then and then we'll get into other products. So I'll let you go there again. We just always have to. I always have to remember, we're not talking to people that spend their whole days thinking about these topics and subjects.
That's a powerful introduction. So let me make it really visual for you. When you're born with these things called stem cells, and these stem cells help us to develop our organs, tell us to grow. Now, when you're born, these stem cells are incredible. They can, if they were an army, they would be like the United States Army. They could fight on every continent and deploy their forces. You would grow, your scars will heal, your cancer potential can be suppressed, all sorts of things are possible. When you get to about the age of about 20, these stem cells have basically had a bit of a tough life. Now they can only fight on a continent, okay? So now they're no longer the U.S. Army. I don't know which army they are, but they can only fight on a small continent.
You don't want to get in trouble, because you travel all over the world. So you're like, let me not.
I don't want to be disallowed from going into our country.
It's also World Cup time, so you want to be nice to all the nations. But go ahead.
And then when you're in middle age, your cells can basically only fight a country. And when you're older, let's say your 60s or 70s, they may be able to fight a small city. And then guess what happens? You're busy fighting this little city, and then somebody sets the battlefield ablaze, and that's called inflammation. So now your cells are trying to regenerate you, and they are on fire. All right? So this is not a good scenario. So this is the whole idea of regenerative medicine. The idea that the body has all the tools to fix itself. And it does have all the tools. And it actually has better tools than medicines. The problem with medicines is they have something called side effects. All medicines at the root, and I have a doctorate, a PhD in pharmacology, they're all toxins, okay? They have to be toxins because they act on some processes, and those processes interfere with the others.
Correct.
The second problem that you have the second problem that regenerative medicine addresses is that not only does it use your own body, but it uses your own body smartly. One of the things that most doctors, when they practice, make a mistake of, they think of the body as a collection of cells and organs. Okay, and that's why we have specialties. You have heart surgeons. This is what what they don't realize and what they don't think about is the body is not just a collection of cells. It is a powerful signaling mechanism.
Yes.
The signals, whether they are at the level of the cell or the levels of, ion transduction or all sorts of more complicated theories like that, are what make us who we are. That's what make us able to survive and adapt over tens of millions of years and actually do better than the dinosaurs. I mean, the dinosaurs actually didn't have that many stem cells, which is another conversation we could have about dinosaurs and stem cells. But the problem is that most doctors do not realize this. Now, let me give you an analogy, and I know you may believe this. One of the pitfalls, I think, of regenerative medicine in general is that people start to hear these things and believe that this is a one-shot cure. And when I talk to my my wife, I say that there are some doctors, who I run across, and basically they're injectors, okay? They want something in a syringe and they want to push that syringe, and then there's a magical cure. Now, you know very well that for regenerative medicine to work, you need a background, okay? You cannot expect to get into regenerative medicine to have a long life and have a terrible diet, to not sleep, to refuse to exercise, to abuse your body with alcohol and drugs. It's not going to work very well. And so you need to be able to have a different mindset to health in order to benefit optimally from regenerative medicine. And sometimes that's very hard for patients to hear, because they say, can't you just give me something for it? That's the typical, give me something for it, because that's what every other doctor does. They give them something for it.
The power of the pen.
And if you say, well, in order for me to help you with your liver problems, to help your liver hopefully regenerate, you can't just go and eat all that junk food. I mean, you just can't do it. You're just going to stop these things. And they said, but I thought you were just going to give me a medicine. I said, well, but it has to work in an environment.
Correct.
This is the same issue that has occurred in the United States with the growth of peptides. Everybody talks about peptides. And in fact, I had an awakening almost about a month ago when I have somebody who drives me around. He wanted to sell me peptides. And I said, but you're the driver. Why would you be selling me peptides? I'm the doctor. And he's telling me what these peptides do. And I was telling him, I like that you really love your AI programs, whether it's Chat or Claude, but you don't understand the fundamentals of what you're talking about. Exactly.
I talk about
and
this
they
constantly.
say, well, just take this, and then you add this peptide to that, and then that peptide gets added to this, and then all of a sudden, you're healthy and you're great. You feel wonderful.
The stacks. Yep.
So what I told him is, I said, think about it this way. One of the biggest problems with peptide medicine is stacks don't work, layers work. And there's a subtle difference between the two. The reason why stacks don't work very well is because peptides also have interactions. The average peptide has probably 1 million signaling molecules associated with it. So by the time you add 5 or 6 of them, you're into trillions of combinations, and no human brain can actually compute that. And so you have to not only be aware of dose, you have to be aware of sequence, you have to make sure that you understand the response of the patient. Everybody's different. The response of the patient, the response to the drug is different for every single individual. You have to be able to tailor it. And it's not simply like sending a box of peptides or a box of products to someone in their house to inject them. And so I told him, you've been working with me for 7 years. You've never seen me do. He said, well, but Prof, some people like to do this cheaper and just inject themselves. I said, but a lot of people harm themselves, and they're going from one set of problems into another set of problems without giving themselves a break.
No, they don't understand. Not only that, for one, they're bombarding the receptors, so that they're getting all that because they're doing the wrong doses. Some of them are their blood glucose levels are going off the charts because they're doing all this growth hormone stuff. Yes. I talk about this all. It's interesting because we had a deep discussion on peptides as well, and like the neuropeptides, Semax, and cell line, all the stuff. But you have to understand how they work in combination with other things. And you're absolutely right. Each patient is different, and somebody needs to monitor it. I will tell you every time on social media that I go on there, if I say things that are very pro-peptide, like I can say anything. BPC1. This is what it shows.
Yes.
Everyone's excited. Everybody's on there, a bunch of new followers. It's wild. As soon as I say, but you need to do this, if you're interested in this, you should do it in conjunction with a lifestyle program, but with a qualified person that can actually that understands systems biology, physiology, pharmacology. Right? Not everyone has a PhD in pharmacology, but just understands all the stuff that we really understand them, and the way that our brains think. oh my God, the pushback. Oh, only doctors can do it. Oh, you guys are just trying to make all the money. I'm like, you know how much I make on peptides? Like $1, $5, like nothing. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to really, manage the. It's just so funny the way that, we just call like the way all the, the gym people, everyone that's selling this stuff, the salons that sell them, apparently I never heard of the like the Uber driver selling peptides. Yeah, get your peptides. They should put like an advert. They could do the advertisement in the back. But it is funny because we're out here and we are pro peptide, we're pro regenerative medicine, but even we then get pushed back by people that are, because they've been so, like some of them are so burnt by the system that then they don't want to hear anything. They're like, oh, you're just trying to hold us back from the, the holy grail. And it's true. I think that all these things in conjunction with the right environment in the back, the canvas, right? And then you paint on the beautiful, you want to just have that. I think that was brilliant. And I really appreciate that. I apologize for the pushback in advance when we post this one on social media with you telling them that they don't know what they're doing with their stacks. And you're absolutely right. They don't know. Just you can't say do this, this, and that, and it's gonna, and everybody should be on it, and that's gonna cure you. You have no idea what the body. People don't know what their epigenetics are. They don't know what their biology is doing. They don't know. They don't measure anything. They just take it. Not to mention the endotoxins that you get from all this stuff that you're getting online, and you're gonna kill. There is a lot of emergency room visits actually with with people having severe allergic reactions. Because they're not quality tested. So anyway, that's a whole brilliant on the peptides. Regenerative medicine. I'm going to bring you back to that. So we talk about like people, I think, generally starting to understand the concept of, like as soon as you're born, there are adult stem cells, the mesenchymal stem cells, they're there. Obviously, as we age, they don't work as well. There's ways to boost stem cell health. We can go into all kinds of stuff, and again, I don't know what claims are right about like the blue-green algae and getting, your own stem cells to, to multiply this and that. We won't even go there because that's like class 2, right? That's our next podcast. Okay. We can go, I want to just get into some of what is myth and what is reality, but just staying on basics, let's talk about things that are non-cellular. Okay. This is really important. Because there's a lot out here and a lot of people are making, claims and all kinds of stuff. And to be honest with you, sometimes I'm confused because I see stuff and I'm like, and then I can't even find information. So somebody calls me and they're like, hey, you got to use this new product. And then I literally can't get information. And then I get on the phone. I'm like, give me your best expert. And they try to explain it to me. I'm like, if I can't understand you, you don't really understand it or there's really nothing, behind it. So let's talk about like one of the products that we've brought in, okay, that you are associated with, and I think it's brilliant. We've had many conversations on this, and thanks for the curbside consults. I actually reach out to you and I say, hey, I've got this patient. Have you? Because that's how we have to do it, right? We have to ask each other, hey, I have this rare thing. I don't like. Is there any value to using this thing? I don't want to have people doing things if it's not a value to them. So these products. So let's talk about like this, regenerative, protein array. Just talk about acellular technologies, where they come from, where they're harvested, and why we believe they are of benefit to people.
Okay, that's like a PhD level question.
Yeah, but you're going to remember.
Let me try and answer it in the style you would do it. Okay, in the style you would do it. Okay, so there are two aspects to this. One in which I started to talk about, which was cells. Cells, in order to communicate, have to be close to one another. Usually, they tend to go through a process, a very complicated process called agglutination, which means they stick together, or sometimes they even consume each other in terms of a phagocytotic process, but they need to be close together. Yes. All right. Then there are things called acellular signaling mechanisms, which do not need to be close to each other. Let me give you a practical example. Let's say you were in the middle of, maybe I shouldn't use an earthquake example because of the horrible tragedy in Venezuela. Yes. But it's a good analogy. Let's say, unfortunately, there was an earthquake, okay? The first thing you're going to do is you want to rebuild your city. So you call an architect. The architect is your stem cell, all right? So the architect says, we need to hire these builders to do this and that, etc., to build back this cathedral that was blown up by the earthquake. But guess what? Nothing's going to happen until the architect produces the blueprint. The blueprint are the acellular signaling mechanisms. So without that, all that would happen is the builders would stand there and they wouldn't know what to do. So you need these acellular signaling mechanisms to tell the cells what to do. Now, so together you need to do both. If you were treating an actual patient, you would want to have the cells and you would want to have the acellular signal. Let me give you an example. Let's say somebody comes to you with a knee problem. You know, they have arthritis in their knee, and 99% of us would simply say, well, we have to provide an injection to the knee to be able to cure it. That is a cellular mechanism, okay? Think about if you didn't have to do that, and I just said to you, I just have to give you an IV, and it's a cell, and somehow your knee will figure out exactly what to do and repair itself. That would be trying to use an acellular mechanism. But in order for an acellular mechanism to work, it has to have certain types of biochemical probes. Those biochemical probes are measured in the laboratory, and they have a lot of complex names, FX, LXR, pKa, enzyme cascades. They have a lot of, and you have to understand that if you're in regenerative medicine. So they have a lot of complex names, but those cells carry these little receptors that send a signal. So it's basically like sending a signal to somebody else in another village. One of my proctors at Oxford, you know, when we were studying the brain, and he said, we were talking about serotonin because he mentioned serotonin, and most people have heard of serotonin. This is, I call it God's own neuron. So, and this God's own neuron because even if you were a single cell organism, you were a giant octopus, or you were a squid, or some, guess what? Or you were a little anemone, what would you have? Serotonin. That's the first thing you were going to have, all right? It's God's own signaling mechanism. And the thing about serotonin and why it's important here is that the fibers in the brain that control serotonin neurotransmission are pretty far away. It would be like sending a message to where probably my hotel is, which is about 10 miles away, and waiting for an answer back. This is why medicines for depression in terms of serotonin take a long time to work. It takes time for the brain to send the message, get it back, change the receptor system. Here, when we're talking about regenerative medicine, it is much, much quicker than that. You're talking about minutes. And those signaling molecules are so powerful that they can actually change the physiology. If you did an experiment, and we've run some of these, and you measured something called immediate early genes. These are genes that change very quickly. You would be able to detect differences in expression levels of mRNA, which is a messenger system of genetics, within a day. This is why sometimes when you give a patient an injection into their knee or of something called RPA, when you expect them to get better 3 days, a week later, they call you back the next day saying, "Doc, I'm better." Why? Because their messaging system is powerfully activated. I want to say something a little bit more provocative. If you really wanted to change biology, you would spend all your effort on signaling mechanisms. The reason why is we have something in our body. We have two types of, I'll make it simple for your audience. Let's assume you have two types of systems. You have one type of systems that is really fast acting. These are called ion channels, okay? They act, and I did my doctorate in ion channels. And I always tell a lovely story about an ion channel, which is when you go into a bar, for example, and my colleagues have their first drink or 2 drinks and the World Cup is going on, they're happy. There is nothing actually going on. There is no alcohol in the brain. It takes 20 to 30 minutes. But that signaling mechanism is so powerful that it has made those individuals think that they're taking alcohol and change the way their brain is working. So when the alcohol comes, it's like a second hit. So signaling mechanisms are extremely important. They're extremely important for development. They're especially important for neurodevelopment because our brains are basically full signaling processes. And if you've never watched an electrical array of all the signaling that goes on, and I participated in a project, trying to measure every single firing of a neuron in a rat brain. I mean, it was an incredibly complex project. It involved, I would say, 200 neuroscientists trying to get this right. So there's a whole cascade of acellular mechanisms that we barely understand, but they're very important for regenerative protein raise. One of the other important things about signaling acellular mechanisms is they are unlikely to produce side effects. The reason is the messages that are coming, or the signaling messages, are being transduced. Think about it as, when you had the old telephone system where somebody will call and then there'll be a receptionist. Yeah. The receptionist will take a plug and push it into something else.
World War II days.
World War II days, maybe even earlier.
Enigma.
Signaling mechanisms, strangely enough, work that way. And therefore, if this signal is the wrong signal, that signal doesn't get uncoupled and plugged into another. But if you give a cell, there is now no differentiation. The cell is going to agglutinate and it's going to transmit, okay? So acellular mechanisms have the potential to be more changing. Now, here is the only kicker in that. If, let's say, you send all these signals using your acellular mechanism, you do have to produce other change. And I want to give you an example in Parkinson's disease, because I see quite a few patients with Parkinson's disease. Most doctors on this planet know that Parkinson's disease is a disease of the brain. It is caused by the loss of something called dopamine, and it's due to loss of dopamine in specific parts of the brain, particularly part of the brain called the substantia nigra. They know that. What they don't really understand sometimes is that the reason why there's this loss of this dopamine is because there's mitochondrial failure.
Yes.
There's mitochondrial leakage. There is synovial dysregulation. There is a loss, if you like, of conduction of even the viable neuronal system. Therefore, if all you did was to give that person dopamine back, because we do have that, we give people a drug called L-Dopa.
L-Dopa.
It works for a little while, and then
awakenings.
Yes,
Robert,
and then guess what? It stops working. Why does it stop working? Because it's a complex system. You mentioned something, doctor, that I think is absolutely fascinating. Doctors nowadays are not investigators. They don't approach a patient as an investigation. When a client comes to us, not only do we do the normal blood test, but we do genetic analysis. We do hormonal analysis.
Yes.
And yes, it is complicated, but that's part of the art of medicine. Yes. This is why you get paid, the big bucks. You need to be able to synthesize that and go on a path like a detective. Because if you do not have any kind of natural curiosity, you become a symptom treater. And when you become a symptom treater, and I've been tough with medical students, I tell them, you really need to find another job. There are lots of jobs that pay a lot more money than medicine, and you can actually tackle it that way. One is, and I know some people will be upset, you can go and work on the stock market. You can follow patterns, you can invest your money. You don't have to understand the basis of why every company works in a specific way. You just need to understand a pattern. But as healers, you need to understand that pattern. One of the other things that you said that I think is incredibly important that should be amplified is the conditioning of the person, not only physically, but mentally. Most people forget that, and this is not mystical or mysterious or energy thing. If your mind or your brain is not prepared to change, no medicine in the world is going to help you. Very few medicines help somebody who's completely hopeless and defeated. So in order to be a healer, you have to not only look at the medical aspects, if you like, or the fully biological, but you also have to integrate that with things that affect the mental processes. So when you have a patient in your clinic with Parkinson's disease, for example, and you're doing well with this patient, you've got to remember that by the time they got to you, they have suffered for 10, 15 years. They have been crying. They have not been able to go to sleep. They have had all these problems. And not very few doctors ask the question, how do you feel? And how did you feel? And how can I make you feel better? And so without having this holistic way of looking at clients or patients, you can't deliver the best healthcare. And unfortunately, if you only had 8 minutes to see a patient, it's completely impossible. So the type of medicine that you and I are trying to practice are in some ways going back to the old age of medicine, of what medicine truly needs to be. And I think that that's going to be the revolution in medicine. And I think it's going to come in a way that most people don't expect. What's going to happen, I think, and I'll give you my prediction, is AI will get so sophisticated that the average doctor will not be able to hold a job. Most systems will be automated. You're not going to require a lot of doctors. You're going to have diagnostic tools, and you're going to have machines doing that. The doctors who are going to survive, who are going to prosper, who are going to make change, who are going to make an impact on their clients, are the ones that spend time listening, that spend time putting things together, that spend time trying to heal the person. All of the things that you said in terms of AI at the beginning, that the machine won't do intuitively. Maybe in 200 years it might be able to, but at this point in time, it won't be able to do that. And I'll tell one day when we were chatting, having a coffee, I'll tell you, how many times people send me notes, and I have sometimes patients send me diagnoses, and I say, I know it was written by ChatGPT or Cloud, and they say, how do you know, doctor? I said, because no one talks like this, and if you really understood it, you wouldn't talk like this. And so that is one of the most fascinating parts of medicine.
I think it's, I think it's brilliant. I think you're absolutely right. We've lost our soul, and this is what I'm hearing a lot, from you. And I think that getting it back, I couldn't agree with you more, because I think that the way that medicine is being treated now, of course, that can be replaced with AI. AI can do those things a lot better, because it's going to tell you what medicines you need and all those things much faster, 10 seconds.
Yes.
Right, and it'll tell you that. So, but the soul part, the how can I help you? What is it that, what are our goals here? How can I help your family? How can I help your family help you? I mean, all these other questions, we're far away from AI taking that. I was going to just go to the, go ahead.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
I want to also qualify and say that it's not that humans are just the emotional component. Humans have a synthesis about them in their brains. And I'll give you one simple example. I unfortunately have a lot of patents, okay? And I remember taking my first patent to the patent office. It got rejected, and I got one of those things through it, and a whole lot of things about why it was rejected and why it was obvious and all this sort of thing. And I ended up having a meeting with the patent officer, and I remember the patent officer, very capable PhD in molecular science, very, very clever person. And she told me, she said, Professor, I can put everything that you have in your patents, and we can analyze it, and I can tell you this, I'll be able to solve this problem, and there's nothing obvious. In 72 hours, just give me the weekend. And I made a bet with her. This is my first patent. I said, if you are able to do that, please deny my patent. But if you're not, please make sure you send me my patent on Tuesday morning. And I told her, you know what's going to happen? Your computer is going to freeze. She said, how can you say that, Professor? And so on Tuesday, my patent arrived. Then I had another conversation with her. And she said, how did you know that, Professor? I said, if you look at this theory that this is based on, we are looking at a cluster of 5 target genetic variants on a chromosome that contains over 5 billion variants. Can you imagine what it would be like to try and calculate 5 billion to the power of 5? And the computer's not going to be able to do it, and it's not going to be able to do something rational. Plus, and I'll introduce a term that your audience may not understand, some parts of DNA are junk DNA, they're not coding. So the computer is not going to be able to work this out. It's going to be a mess. You know, even the CERN computer would crash. And she said, how did you work this out? I said, only by intuition. Only by this thing that a human brain can do, which is a synthesis of information, of discounting a lot of things that don't work. And I had spent a week on this. I did by hand. I showed her my math calculations by hand. She thought that this was just a joke. And then guess what? As I had my second meeting, she said, can I take your notes, Professor?
No, that's yeah, but even
so, but that's what a computer can't do, and it can't do that with a patient.
100%. Yeah, but it's just not only that. It's like we're having I talk about this all the time. We're having a conversation right now. Yes. We're energy. We're connected to the. Now we're going to go. I mean, I'm not going to go super woo woo. We'll do that offline. We can go because we're both there.
I want you to do that, and I want to actually say something.
Think about that. When we start having our conversation, people can actually be measuring our quantitative EEGs, and we start vibrating at the same frequency, right? And there's all these things about how your vibrational energy can change a room. You can take people and bring them from here to here, but you can also bring them down here. Those are things that the machines can't do. We can do that, from each other, and heal ourselves. And I don't want to go too far down we're getting close to the end.
I do want to say something. So because I'm recently remarried. My wife says this to me all the time.
Congratulations.
She says to me, the energy in which you bring to your patients is primarily important. That first handshake, that first look, that first ability to say, I care about you and I want you to get better is very important. And don't leave the house without that energy. If you want to leave the house and you're not in a good mood or whatever, stay at home. Have the nurses see the patient. And I began to realize because, having gone through a really formal education, doctoral degrees that I worked for at Oxford, doctoral science degrees, all of this science and all of this technology and all of this mathematics. And it made me realize that without that human connection, that healing, that energy, that ability to have somebody believe that you can help them and they believe in themselves, it's useless. It truly is close to useless. And some of the times patients come to me, it's not that the other doctor made a mistake or there was something wrong. It's not usually that, but they did not allow the patient to speak for themselves, to be understood, to be able to articulate the problem and to actually deliver the treatment the patient wants, not the diagnosis, the patient's problem, So I believe in energies, maybe not in a metaphysical sense, but the energy that a human can transmit is is very different from a computer.
It's such a big part of the, of the healing process. It's hard to know. I recently had there's just two more things. I'm going to ask you one more question as we wrap. So one is just a good example is we know, as a surgeon, that your mindset around your thought on whether or not you can heal whatever you're going through makes a huge difference. There was a patient recently that had a spinal cord injury that was basically moving a toe. And before we went into surgery, this is very recent, this is like a couple weeks ago, before I took her into surgery, she basically looked at me and she said, "Doctor, if I'm never going to walk again, make sure that you kill me while you're doing the surgery. I don't want to wake up unless I'm going to walk." So then we spent a long time with her and her husband talking about positivity and just explaining to her, I've done this for a long time. I believe that, I strongly believe that we're going to be able to repair this and get all this pressure off of her spinal cord and get, I wanted to do that, even though it actually delayed her surgery going in. They're like, "Doctor, why are we not going into surgery?" I was like, "Because I have to have this conversation first. I can't, because this is more important."
Yes.
And again, the surgery went perfectly, everything went well, so she might have recovered anyway, but she recovered she's normal. And I truly believe that part of that was that we were able to at least shift her mindset a little bit, because I just don't want them to be I hate that, like if they're going to have surgery and they're all it's never going to work, I'm going to have pain the rest of my life. I'm like, well, why are we even, what I mean? I think that, but the other thing is, I just wanted to get this a thought that I had before, and then I just want to ask you an anecdote on a patient. But recently we had a patient that came. You talk about the signaling and how fast it works. This one shocked me.
Yes.
Because this is an RPA case. This patient came in, big disc hernia, severe pain down the leg, and a partial foot drop.
Yes.
The pain was so horrible. And it's interesting because my partner that did the procedure told this patient's kind of a well-known person, and the person, and he told them, he's like, this might take 3, 4, 5 days to kick in, maybe even a week or two. That patient called the next day after they went back to their state and said, my pain went from a 10 to like a 2. They're like, I have almost no pain, and look, and they sent a video, look my foot. My foot works again.
Yes.
One time. With this signal, it's really amazing how different it works in this. So I was going to, and we're seeing some of this. We're doing the intrathecal injections and all kinds of. It's interesting how quick some of this stuff can work, and the IVs can work, and people feel really good. Sometimes you get a little bit of a retrace, but we can get into that another side. Can you give me just an example of a patient where it worked really fast, getting like an IV RPA treatment? And then we'll table it for part 2 of this podcast, which we're gonna have to do.
I was going to tell you what a phenomenal doctor you are, because you understood something really basic about your client. And I'll just have one little anecdote to that. Sometimes patients come to you with no hope. And I had a patient last week, and the husband started to talk about dying. And I said, I haven't lost anybody in decades, so talking to me about dying is sort of rather pointless, because it doesn't occur and it doesn't happen in this clinic. And I said, if you're really worried about dying, you started dying when you were 7 months old anyway. It's a pretty long process. So we've not talked about anything new here, so let's get on to helping and healing.
Yes, I love it. Changing that mindset is huge.
Changing that mindset.
Yes.
So one of the best things that I had was a patient who'd had a neck injury, had been in a car accident, and he had a crushed C3, C4. And he was told he needed to have a neck brace, he needed to have, you're a spinal surgeon, so I'm giving you a spinal example. And he said, should I have neck surgery, upper neck surgery? I said, lower back surgery is bad enough. Upper neck surgery, you may not make it, friend. So I actually then decided we were going to do, and I very rarely do cervical intrathecals. I usually do lumbar intrathecals. They're much safer. And if you're a doctor watching this, I wouldn't recommend you go and try a cervical intrathecal unless you really have a lot of knowledge and you're using a Doppler and the right machines and imaging. You can't really just shove that needle in. And he had that, and about 15 or 20 minutes later, he had no pain. That was the most powerful example. Never needed to go back. I mean, now if you looked at his X-ray, of course we didn't repair his, the crushed vertebrae. I mean, they still look crushed, but then because the signaling in the nerves and the level of inflammation was so reduced, even though he had reduced capacity, which I could see on there, he was pain-free.
Incredible.
And that was 20 minutes. And he then sometimes jokes to me and calls me and says, "Can I come and have another injection?" I said, "Well, but is there anything wrong with you?" "No, but just in case."
Just in case. No, I think no. It's brilliant. It's amazing.
Yes.
How fast it can work. We'll talk about you and other, but I've gotten the IV injections myself more for longevity purposes and just more aches and pains, and you know how hard I go.
I know. Have you tried the MUSE? Have you tried MUSE RPA?
I just go. I haven't done.
Oh my goodness.
I
my
haven't
goodness.
done MUSE.
You need to try that.
Yeah. Can you just last thing, just because you brought that up, just say what's the difference between MUSE and regular RPA, and then we'll have to table it for next.
MUSE-Infused RPA is basically, if you like, a super molecule. These MUSE cells and the secretosome, or basically what is inside these MUSE cells, these are the most resistant and hardened, if you like, group of your army. I don't know whether I'd call them the Marines or whatever, but they are they're the back line. They have survived oxidative stress. They have survived things called thymosin injury. They have survived chemical injury. They constitute less than 10 to 15% of your total cellular mechanism. So these are your super forces, and therefore having the MUSE RPA, unfortunately, that makes them expensive. But having the MUSE RPA is really like the top. I had a client fly over to me from a foreign country, and he was able to leave his plane at Miami, and we started off with the usual treatments with exosomes, etc., for his Parkinson's. But the game changer was when we started with the MUSE RPA combination. That really, that just changed everything. Intrathecally.
Yes, so we're doing a lot
I don't do, it's funny, a lot of doctors are intrathecal is an injection into the spine, into the spinal space.
Fluid, yes.
But, you're a superb spinal surgeon, so you have confidence in doing it. Most doctors have zero confidence. In fact, they're even scared when you mention it, and they're not going to do it at all. And so this is the best way because if you're trying to get something into the brain is actually one of the hardest things to get anything into.
BBB.
It's got a barrier there called the blood-brain barrier. It refuses to open, and there's a good reason for that, because if it opened all the time, every time we went and consumed water or beer, our brains would be flooded with it. Yeah. So it has to have this barrier, but you can open this barrier intermittently. You can open it with chemicals. There's a chemical called mannitol that does it very well. You have to give a pretty high dose, but it only opens. Most doctors don't realize it only opens it for a minute or a few seconds. So if you're still prepping and you didn't do your injection, it's lost. Now, there are other ways of doing it now. You could use a type of focused ultrasound to do it. But this is really at the edge of technology we should talk about the next time, using MUSE-Infused RPA and focused ultrasound, which is, almost, I'll use a Star Trek term, like the final frontier.
It's next. All right, we're going to leave it on the cliffhanger, right there, because we've got amazing information. I think it's great for the audience to get to know you some, because you really feel deep. You want to help people. If they want to find your work, and they find you, and then they're going to have to tune in for part 2. Yes.
I'm sure you'll supply all the details of how to find me.
Okay, I will. I'll put it down in the end. That's how modest this man is. He's like, you let him know where to find me, guys. Dr. Bankole Johnson, this has been incredible. This is eye opening. I look forward to working with you for a long time to come.
We're going to have fun.
Fantastic.
And we're going to heal a lot of people.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us on this very special episode of Wellness at the Speed of Light podcast. We will see you next time, and I'll announce part 2 coming up, hopefully not too long in the future. See you guys next time. Be CEOs of your own health. See you next time.